Because if you look around this building here, it's clear to most of us here that we are not Catholics. We do not have a mess of images around. There is no Saint Mary. There's no baby Jesus. There's no Saint Lawrence or Saint Martin or any of that. We don't have the images. And yet we have that, we bear that same burden that somehow we got the image part wrong, but we don't have the images. It's strange. Lutherans fall into a strange gap here. Christians, right after the resurrection, or in the early church, started to have trouble with images, but then they got over it real quick. In the same way St. Paul had to deal with dietary laws, the same way St. Paul had to deal with Sabbath keeping and all these things, Christians changed a great deal from the Jews and the Jewish culture and the Jewish religion that they left behind. They kept a lot of it, but certain things they changed. One of those things was images. They started to use images in worship because they said Jesus is the image of God. And if Jesus is the true, complete image of God, then God used an image to teach us about himself. Fair enough? If God can do it, why can't we? And so for the first 700 years of the church's life, they filled their churches with images. Filled them with paintings, with statues, with all manner of images. Big statues, little statues, rosaries, all sorts of things to help people remember their faith. And it worked very, very well. About 700 or so, don't quote me on this, I'm not exactly on the time, Muhammad began to write the Quran. Muhammad was one of these people who was disturbed by images. And he went back to the commandments in the Judaism and he grabbed that and he said, you know, we're not going to have any graven images in my religion, in my Quran here. I'm not exactly if he actually said that, don't quote me, but you know, there's the same gist of that. Now, Islam spread like wildfire throughout the Eastern Mediterranean. And the Christians who came under the influence of Islam, whether they were conquered or they resisted, had to deal with that accusation that the Islamic people said, you Christians are all idolaters because look at all the images you have. And by that time, cities like Byzantium, Alexandria were filled, churches were filled with images, icons, images. And they said, maybe they're right. Maybe these Islamic people have a true accusation. And so there became this controversy during the 8th and 9th centuries in the East called the iconoclast controversy. You've heard that word iconoclast for someone who does things differently, who's a pioneer. Iconoclast means an image breaker. Someone who goes into a church and takes the image and breaks it, shatters it. That's an iconoclast. An iconoclast swept through the Eastern Church, breaking images, casting images out of church, and purifying the church. At the same time, there was a counter-reformation, people called iconodules or iconophiles, probably is the easiest word, people who saw images and loved them and used them and appreciated them. They'd grown up with them. They didn't want St. Mary and the baby out of the church, and so they fought back. Well, in 842, the Orthodox Church finally came down and had what they called the victory of orthodoxy. They celebrate it even to this day. As a matter of fact, next Sunday, the first Sunday in Lent, is when they celebrate this day. The victory of orthodoxy, where the church decided finally, once and for all, yes, we are going to use images in worship. Period. That's it. That's the end of the iconoclast controversy. In 1410 or 1420, when Martin Luther, 1520, excuse me, 1517, nailed the 95 Theses on there, a new Reformation began. Martin Luther, however, had no problem, hear this, no problem at all with images in worship. The churches, Lutheran churches in Germany to this day, are characteristically full of images. St. Mary, Jesus, Holy Family, the whole 9 yards. They've got them, okay? However, many reformers that followed Luther. In fact, people like Karlstadt, who was one of his lieutenants in Wittenberg, felt that icons were evil, the images were evil, and they had to get them out. And there was, again, a large controversy. And because of that, today, Baptist churches, Methodist churches, Presbyterian churches, just about every Protestant church in America, except ours, and Episcopalians too, but they, well, anyhow, we don't, they don't use images. In fact, they use the second commandment, thou shalt make no graven image, to a greater or lesser extent. Some of them will tolerate pictures of Jesus with, sheep over there, or, the wise men, musicians, and angels, for instance, images like that. But nothing more than that. Okay? That's them. It's not us. We're not like that. But here's the problem. We are like that. If you look around our sanctuary here, look around it, you can tell that we don't have anything against images, okay? But if you look at these windows, you can tell we don't really use images. We don't embrace them. We don't use them like we could. I have been in a Catholic church, probably the most exciting church I've ever been in. Carol and I, we went on a trip when we were in Austria, in Salzburg. We went on the Sound of Music excursion. Okay, and you got to see the Von Trapp family house, the Von Trapp family, whatever, this and that. The place where the kids sang through doe, a deer, a female deer, that whole thing. That's right, yeah, that's through there. Anyhow, at the end of the movie, Maria and Captain Von Trapp are married in this enormous, Baroque cathedral. Okay, how many people remember the big wedding ceremony? Dun, 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 dun. You betcha. Okay, I've been in that church. It's not actually in Salzburg. It's outside of Salzburg. Beautiful church. You walk down the center aisle of that church, and you look at the walls. There is not a spare, bare wall in the building. Every wall has a picture. Every pillar has an image. Everywhere there's scripture. Everywhere there are scenes from the Bible. There are scenes of the saints being faithful. There are pictures, words, scripture. Everywhere. It's insane. It's a Baroque building, which means, Baroque I think means in the original really, really busy. Okay? For someone with ADD, it would be a nightmare. Or a festival. It depends on your point of view.